watching on Twitter at CS Now Tweets, whether it's Varsity Network channel, YouTube, the Varsity Network channel, Facebook, Learfield Audio, and at CS Now Tweets. Phil, it's like I'm walking into my introductory press conference. Not meant to be a Halloween costume here ahead of Monday, but we got these snazzy Learfield 50 driving 50, celebrating 50 years of Learfield. Tripp didn't get the memo. He didn't read the email for it, so otherwise.
What are you going to do?
But Phil, looking dapper as always yourself. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, where's my Learfield stuff, guys?
Oh, we got to send you some swag. We dropped the ball. We dropped the ball in that regard. You know who didn't drop the ball? Tripp heard this past weekend. The teaser, it hit.
Nice job, Tripp. I told you we were going to win it, Tripp, didn't I?
Look, yeah, you did. And even, you know what, Phil, listening to you talk about the Alabama-Mississippi State game, you kind of changed my mind on that, but it would have hit either way. It was good either way. We had ended up changing it to Bama minus 14, still hit.
Touchdown 0-0 left in the game.
Yeah.
Amazing. Good for you. More magic on the way here for Week 9. Hurd. Follow him on Twitter at Tripp Hurd. I'm at Kyle Shasso. Week 8 was awesome, Phil. It wasn't as potent as what we had seen in previous weeks, but still you had some incredible quarterback performances. Bo Nix, Sam Hartman, Jaden Daniels, all accounting for at least 5 touchdowns. Sam Hartman had 6. You had TCU coming from behind again. Are they going to run out of gas this weekend? And Texas A&M, yikes, they lose to South Carolina for the first time in SEC history. South Carolina previously was 0-8. So what will be the big bopping headlines heading into Week 9? Phil will help to handicap and get you prepared here for the weekend. 3 teams are tied for the worst ATS record nationally at 1-6. Boston College, Colorado, Miami. The good news is, Phil, we're going to ignore them all today. So let's get to 20-plus other games. And we'll start on Thursday night. We've got 3 of them. Lafayette, a 2.5-point underdog. Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns, meeting Southern Miss. These two have been playing since 1923, Phil. However, they're just playing for the first time since 2016, and Southern Miss is 22-1 at home all-time against the Ragin' Cajuns. This is a 7:30 game on ESPN2. 43 is the total. Golden Eagles, 2.5-point favorites. Question is it going to be more Ben Wildridge or Chandler Fields at quarterback for Louisiana? Wildridge has played well.
Yeah, I think the way Wildridge is playing, why take him out? I mean, they've had 2 really good games in a row. I was very impressed with their win at Marshall 2 weeks ago. And then last week, they did take advantage of an Arkansas State team where James Blackman looked good. He was in the warm-ups. Then all of a sudden he doesn't play, and they're taking on a backup quarterback and rolled to a 20-point win there. And Southern Miss sort of flying under the radar in my mind. You look at their losses this year, they've been at Troy, at Miami of Florida, and against a very good Liberty team, and one in which they lost Ty Keys to injury early. I think Zach Wilkie's been picking it up at the quarterback position. They still have Frank Gore at running back. And defensively, they're holding opponents to 24 yards per game below their season average. I would rate the game a toss-up, so I'm going to lean with the home team to come out of here with the win. I like Southern Miss in that one.
40-11-1 all-time since 1923 is Southern Miss. Tripp.
Yeah, I'm on the Southern Miss train too. They've got a good defense, and they've been good to me so far this year. I think I'm 2-0 when I go with Southern Miss. I know I had them in the Tulane game a couple weeks back. But another game Thursday night, 7:30, Virginia Tech at NC State. 2 teams kind of going in the wrong direction right now. Virginia Tech's just a complete mess, and we know NC State's still without Devin Leary. They've got Jack Chambers. That didn't look very good up at Syracuse a couple weeks ago. Dave Doran says he's had 12 days to practice now. It's going to look better this week. I don't know if I'm buying it. I don't know if they can cover that line. I am kind of leaning towards the under at 39.5. What do you see here, Phil?
Yeah, I think the under is probably your best bet. I was surprised in the game against Syracuse that they were so conservative with Chambers at the quarterback spot. Because as I pointed out in our other ones, Chambers was a solid FCS quarterback. He can throw the football, and when they did let him throw, I thought he threw the ball well at Syracuse. So I was surprised they were as limited as they were. You've got 2 really good defenses here. Virginia Tech holding opponents to 35 yards per game below their season average. NC State's got one of the best defenses out there. The 2 things I would look at, Virginia Tech has actually won the last 5 in this series, straight up and against the spread. They're getting 2 double digits in a game you expect to be low scoring. So I do like Virginia Tech, but I also like the under in this game. I think both would be good plays.
Hokies have won 5 straight in the series. I have to agree with you on the under, Phil. Virginia Tech games as a whole, they've gone under the last 5. But when you get such a strong defense in NC State, not know what you're getting at with quarterback and going against a struggling Virginia Tech team who has lost 4 in a row, I think the under is the best play here. NC State, by the way, 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games. Third game of Thursday night. We've got 3 of them. It's going to go up against the NFL, of course, but we know college football is going to reign supremacy in all of our households. Utah at Washington State. The Utes, 7.5-point favorite, 56 the total, 10 o'clock game on FS1. This is a fascinating game to me, Phil, because it's opposites, right? You look at the brutalizing defense of Utah coming off a bye now, going up against what traditionally is such a high-powered offense in Washington State. And Wazoo has struggled here, losing 3 of 4 since their 3-0 start. Utah 4-1 against the spread in their last 5. But it's the battle of the Cams, Cam Ward and Cam Rising.
Yeah, and I think when you take a look at this game, you have to remember the last time Utah was here on the Palouse for a game. It was a game I thought Utah played extremely well in. And then Washington State, with about 4:14 to game go in the game, got an 89-yard touchdown pass to take the lead. Utah got a punt return for a touchdown, which a very questionable flag. Utah fans not very happy about that one and sort of felt that game was taken away from them. Now, the last 3 years, or the last 3 meetings have all been at Utah, so this would be the first trip to the Palouse since that game. I do think Utah's got a massive defensive edge here, and as I've pointed out in other shows that we've done here, Washington State, when they played Wisconsin, was actually out first down 22-10. When they played Oregon, it was a game where they were outgained 624-348 until they drove 80 yards for a touchdown the last play of the game to make the yardage a little bit closer. And then they went on the road and lost to both USC and Oregon State. So while Washington State's got a pretty good record at 4-3, I think Utah's a legitimate team. They cannot afford another loss. If they lose one more time, they're probably out of the Pac-12 title game. I still think they have an excellent shot at getting back there. We'll talk about their Oregon matchup down the road. But Cam Rising is the quarterback I put more trust in. The defense of Utah, more trust in there. And I think Utah's capable of going to Palouse and coming out of there with the win, even laying more than a touchdown, slightly more than a touchdown, 7.5.
Before we pivot to Friday, a reminder, follow Phil on Twitter at PhilSteele042. Also give you a peek behind the curtain on some of our games here if you're watching live on YouTube or see us now tweets, Learfield Audio on Facebook, Phil Steele Plus. Give you a glimpse of what you can access for $100 annually, all the advanced data and stats that are updated every single Sunday following the games. The stats that Phil uses week in and week out for his projections, for his picks, the power ratings, the special teams rankings, access to every FBS team page, FCS team page, even NFL team pages are all there. Phil Steele Plus. Go to philsteele.com for more information. Continue to interact with us at CS Now Tweets for your chance to win a free subscription to Phil Steele Plus, valued at $99 next year.
All right, on to Friday. We've got 2 games. The first one we're looking at, we've got East Carolina going out to Provo to take on BYU. It's an 8 o'clock start time for that one, and it looks like BYU is laying 3.5 right now. Look, ECU's losses to NC State in a game they should have won, overtime to Navy in a game they probably should have won, and then they had a loss to Tulane, who looks like they're a pretty good football team. BYU just got outgained 547-258 against Liberty. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards the Pirates here in this one, Phil. What do you think?
Yeah, Trip, I think the situation really favors BYU being at home in the altitude, catching East Carolina off the big win against UCF with Cincinnati on deck. However, this is what I like to see, and it's a red-green game in my matchup. When you look at Phil Steele Plus, you can see things that jump out at you. And where the heck did BYU's defense go? You go back and take a look last year, they played pretty good defense, but at the end of the year, they gave up a lot of rush yards. Once again, this year, look at this. The last 4 games, they're giving up 254 yards per game, 5.6 yards per carry. Now, this gives you the last 4 weeks right here. This is your season average. So their rush defense giving up 5.6 yards per carry. You come over here to East Carolina, Keaton Mitchell's a guy that's got 667 yards, 6.8 yards per carry. And while Rajay Harris got injured and he's out for the year, Marlon Gunn, the freshman, may have the most upside of the 3 running backs. He's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. So they should be able to run the football on BYU. East Carolina, meanwhile, only giving up 114 yards rushing the last 3 weeks. They're playing much better there. As you mentioned, Tripp, they should have beaten NC State. They missed an extra point, missed a field goal in that game. I think East Carolina is the better team, and just wondering where BYU has gone. If you look at my last 4 weeks average game grade, East Carolina's playing at 102.3 level. BYU's playing at an 89 level. Give them a 4-point home edge, and it still says East Carolina by 9, and they're getting points. I would agree with you 100%. I like East Carolina in this one.
8 o'clock game on ESPN2. I really love Holton Ahlers. He's the American Athletic Conference leading passer at this point of the season. Pirates coming off the win over UCF. BYU, 3 straight losses after getting stopped by Liberty. How will they respond? They've kind of been lifeless at times, just going through the motions. You don't know what BYU team you're going to get. A model of inconsistency for sure this year out of Provo. Unique game, too, going on the road. ECU was there in 2015, though, and lost in a shootout. Let's move to Louisiana Tech and FIU. The Bulldogs favored by 6.5 last check. 57 is the total. 8 o'clock on CBS Sports Network on Friday. FIU 0-4 all-time, seeking their first ever win against Louisiana Tech. Tech, Phil, played in maybe the game of the weekend a week ago that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and honestly, why would they unless it's us, right? And that was a 42-41 overtime defeat to Rice last week.
Yeah, and that was a heck of a game right down to the wire. You look at Tech's defense, and once again, you have a unit where we'll just click on that real quick. Let's see where we're at. There we go. And there we go. All right, so let's take a look at Tech's defense. I see a lot of red here. They're giving up 265 yards per game, 6.4 yards per carry. That doesn't bode well on the defensive side. They also struggle running the ball, only averaging 3.2 yards per carry. Lexington Joseph is a quality back. He's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. Should be able to take advantage of that. And if you look at the two teams, I know FAU, you think they're a horrible team, right? Well, I see some green over here. I mean, they beat Bryant. Granted, it was a late win, not very impressive. They beat New Mexico State. It was your sicko pick of the week, a great call there. And then they went into Charlotte, and last week they got the Charlotte's head coach fired with a dominating win, 453 to 337 yards. So they're playing really good ball as of late. They're at home. Tech's defense is woe begone, and Parker McNeil questionable for the game for Louisiana Tech as well. This could be an upset. I like FIU plus the points in a potential upset here.
Let's head to the weekend now on Saturday, and we have 3 games featuring a pair of top 25 teams. So not as many as we have seen in the most recent weeks, but 3 heavyweight battles. But I want to start with Auburn and Arkansas on the Plains at Jordan-Hare. And we're going to do things a little bit differently here today, Phil, moving forward. We're going to do this chronologically. We're going to split it by day part. So today for those games starting at noon, and the Hogs and Tigers both squaring off after a bye week. Auburn 3.5-point underdogs at home. 62 is the total. 12 o'clock is the start at Jordan-Hare. Arkansas has lost the last 4 at Auburn, including the last 6 overall. What do you think of the Hogs and the Tigers?
Yeah, and the first question you have is, I'm surprised Brian Harson's still the head coach at Auburn. You know they're going to fire him. They had a bye week, so why not just do it during the bye week? They didn't, but as you correctly pointed out, Kyle, they've got 6 straight wins in the series, 5-1 against the spread, and that's thing, and they've won the last 4 of them at home. So they're doing extremely well in that respect. And Auburn's really not been a bad football team. I mean, they've got Tank Bigsby. They've got Hunter in the backfield. Ashford is getting better by the week. Remember, they led LSU 17-0. The Georgia game, they were only outgained by 6 yards at the half. Georgia got 2 short fields to lead 14-3. Then it sort of fell apart in the second half, and they covered their last game at Ole Miss. Played a pretty good game there as well. Arkansas does have KJ Jefferson back, but I tell you what, that impressive win over BYU doesn't look so impressive after what we saw BYU against Liberty last week. So we'll wonder what they have here. I got to side with the home underdog here. I like Auburn plus the points to potentially pull the upset.
Tigers are 1-4 in their last 5 against the spread. One interesting maybe prop, if you can find it, a first half total for Arkansas. The Hogs have hit the team total over in the first half over their last 5 contests. All right, Tripp, your boys are back off the bye. Your seminal moment. It's all you.
Yep, the Noles are back on the docket this week after a bye, and they're taking on Georgia Tech at Doak Campbell Stadium, noon kickoff. Looks like they're laying 24.5, 47.5 is the total. After Florida State's lost 3 in a row, I guess Vegas still believes in them a little bit, but Jeff Sims, he's questionable. Florida State is getting healthy. They're saying they're going to have Ja'Kai Douglas at wide receiver back. Fabian Lovett at defensive tackle should be back, and he's a big-time player for them on that defensive front. So I still I don't really have a pick in this game because I don't feel comfortable laying that many points with Florida State right now.
Fair enough. And you know what? On Phil Steele Plus, if you click on the opponent right here, it gives you this history of this series. This is the last 25 years matchups. One thing I want to point out, if you look at this column here, this is your score of the game. Green means that they won the game outright. Red means that they lost. They've lost 4 of the last 6 to Georgia Tech. And look at this. Georgia Tech has actually covered 7 in a row against Florida State with 3 outright upsets. Out here, if it's red upset, that means they lost the game outright. But I'll tell you what, I thought Georgia Tech was going to beat Virginia in their last game. Their offense looked horrible against the Virginia defense. It was very beatable. Only came up with 9 points in that game. Ended up losing to a not so good Virginia team at home. Now they've got to go on the road. And whereas Brent Key captured some magic in a bottle with that win over Pitt, maybe that win over Duke at home, now they're taking on a Florida State team that's just taken on Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson. A lot of teams would have lost those 3 games. And yet you look at this team, they're plus 133 yards per game. My average game grade has them at 110.1, which is number 16 in the country, despite these 3 losses. They actually have outgained both Clemson and NC State in their last games. So as much as Georgia Tech has this series history, I think Florida State might just be waiting to smack somebody right here and have the talent to do so. I got to go with Florida State minus the points.
Man, I hope you're right.
Jeff Sims is questionable for Georgia Tech under center with a sprained foot. So Brent Key could be employing both of the Zacks. I know Zach Gibson, the former Akron quarterback, got most of the snaps in that atrocious game against Virginia last Thursday. We'll see if Georgia Tech can play any better in Tallahassee. Notre Dame is on the road. They're going to the JMI Wireless Dome for the first time since 2003, and they lost that game 38-12. However, Notre Dame has won 25 straight regular season games inside the ACC against ACC opponents. Notre Dame at Syracuse. The line is 2.5. Syracuse is favored. 48 is the total. 12 o'clock, Phil. Irish and orange.
Yeah, you stole some of my thunder there, Kyle. I was going to lead with the fact that Notre Dame's actually won 25 in a row against ACC foes. So they absolutely dominate. Remember earlier this year, there's a lot of question marks. Can they beat North Carolina? They were on the road. North Carolina's got a big offensive edge. Guess what? They had a 208-yard edge in the game, outgained North Carolina 576-367, and came out with the win. Their last 3 wins against Dino Babers, or their only 3 games against Dino Babers, they have won by 24.7 points per game. And the Irish an outstanding 16-6-1 against the spread on the road. Last week for Syracuse, the huge play. How about the fumble return for a touchdown? Clemson about to make it 14-7. Clemson had a 450-291 yard edge, but the +3 in turnovers really helped Syracuse. A 95-yard fumble return for a touchdown made it a 14-point swing. Instead of trailing by 7, they led by 7, and Clemson was in the catch-up mode the rest of the game. I don't think they get as lucky here. I do think their defense got beat up last week. You saw a lot of players coming off the field. I like the Irish to go on the road and pull the upset, even though I don't consider it an upset here.
And the question will be, how is Sean Tucker going to be used by Dino Babers, too? Questionable use of the star running back last week in Clemson, especially when they had the lead. Ohio State at Penn State, the first of 3 games featuring top 25 opponents. Nittany Lions at home. This won't be a whiteout. It'll be a white stripes game. Penn State is a heavy underdog, 15.5. The Buckeyes are favored by 61.5 is the total, 12 o'clock on Fox. Phil, I was surprised to see, though, the last 6 of these games, they've been very close, within a touchdown. Average margin of victory over the last 6, 6.3 between these two. C.J. Stroud, 28 touchdowns to lead the country. Can the Penn State defense limit him? and play Ohio State tight after a big win over Minnesota a week ago.
You're stealing all my ideas here, Kyle. I was gonna.
Hey, great mustaches think alike,
There you
Phil.
go.
Okay?
There you go. I was going to lead with that. If you look at the series history here for Penn State, you see some Reds in the losses, but all these games have been close. In fact, the most points that they've lost to in the last 6 years has been by 13 points, and they're getting 15 and a half here. And I can tell you, there's been many a game where this one's coming up. And last year, for example, let's take a look at last year. Last year, Penn State lost to Iowa. Remember, they lost their quarterback, Sean Clifford, to injury. The next week, they play Illinois. And it was a horrific game for Penn State's offense. They could not score. They had 227 total yards in the game. Clifford was banged up. It was horrible. It went 8 overtimes, and they couldn't even score 2-point conversions in overtime. In 8 overtimes, they managed 18 points. They were going to play Ohio State on the road in Columbus. They don't have a prayer, right? And what happens in that game? They played Ohio State great the entire game. And ended up only losing by 9 in a game that was probably closer than the final score would even indicate. So Penn State just has something where, yeah, they didn't play well against Michigan, but they usually play Ohio State tough. This is a huge game for Penn State in a stripe out game versus Ohio State, which they might be up a little bit for Penn State, but I don't know how much, especially after winning 5 of the last 6. So as bad as Penn State looked against Michigan, as great as Ohio State's looked all year, this is going to be a series history play for me. I'm going to take Penn State plus the 15 and a half.
All right, let's bounce over to the Big 12. We've got 2 teams coming off a bye. Oklahoma at Iowa State. Oklahoma 4-3, Iowa State 3-4. And Iowa State, they've lost their last 4 games by a combined total of 14 points. They're playing some really close games, and at first glance, with them being at home, I kind of lean towards the Cyclones. But I will be honest, Dylan Gabriel looked pretty good. He looked sharp the last time out against Kansas, and that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, and in this game, I absolutely like Iowa State. In fact, I think the only reason that Oklahoma's favored is probably name recognition and the fact of Iowa State's overall record that they have coming into the game. Iowa State's got a vastly superior defense. Take a look at their defense so far this year. They're holding opponents to 128 yards per game below their season average, number 4 in the entire country. Look at all this green over here. They're tough against the run. They're tough against the pass. They're allowing 290 yards per game. Look at all this red over here for Oklahoma's defense. The last 4 weeks, they're giving up 548 yards per game, 117. If you come into a game averaging 400 yards per game, they're going to give you 517. They give you 117 yards above your season average. Iowa State holds you to 115 yards per game below your season average. I think Hunter Deckers is a pretty good quarterback. We'll be able to exploit this defense. As bad as their offense has been, I think Iowa State at home. They should have probably have won the Kansas game. Remember, they missed 3 field goals. They lose the Kansas State game by 1. Texas gets a late touchdown to beat them, and they played a good game against Baylor. Oklahoma, as good as they looked against Kansas, keep in mind that's Kansas's defense, not Iowa State's. I like Iowa State at home to pull the upset in this one.
That works for me. Let's keep it in the Big 12. TCU coming off a really big win over Kansas State. They kind of keep digging themselves holes, but they crawl back out of them every time. They're playing in Morgantown against West Virginia. Looks like they're favored by 7.5 with a total sitting at 68.5. I know West Virginia is better at home, and I do think they'll probably have a little bit of a bounce back from that really bad performance against Texas Tech, but I'm not crazy about the line here. But I have looked, the under is 7-1 in their last 8 meetings, so that might be a lean there.
Yeah, and I also like in this game I like West Virginia. And if you take a look, I've clicked on the series history here for you already. You see West Virginia's actually won the last 4 meetings straight up. Once again, just look here, green, red. And over here's their cover. They've actually covered the last 6. If this column's green, that means the team covered. So they're 4-0 straight up against TCU, covered the last 6. But the thing I love best about this one is the situation. Remember West Virginia, their last home game. They played Baylor, and they upset Baylor. Now, that's a pretty good Baylor team. Here's what TCU has done. This game against SMU, that's a big game. That's the Iron Skillet game. The very next week, they play Oklahoma. They are fired up for Oklahoma, and they get a big win, and everybody's patting them on the back. The very next week, it's a battle of the unbeatens, them and Kansas. and they come out with a 7-point win thanks to a Kansas turnover into the end zone and losing their starting quarterback. Then they play Oklahoma State. Once again, battle of the unbeatens. They're down by 17 points. They rally, pull it out in 2 overtimes. You wonder at that point, how much do you have left in the tank? And you go back to the Kansas State game. Right here, we show you the half times. It was actually Kansas State 28-10 in this game. And what happened? Kansas State lost their starting quarterback, Adrian Martinez, on the first series. Will Howard played great in the first half, but then he got injured in the third quarter. Rubley comes off the bench. His one pass is intercepted, return for a touchdown. They only have 12 offensive plays in the second half. Howard did come back in, but he wasn't 100%. Kansas State lost its offense, and TCU got the win 38-28. So now you've played big game, big game, big game, big game, big game, traveling across the country to face West Virginia, a team nobody's going to be up for. I mean, West Virginia comes into this 3-4. They're big favorites in the game. This is your C game for TCU. This is an A game for West Virginia, and absolutely must win at home. The outright upset doesn't surprise me at all in this one.
2 other teams in a bitter rivalry coming off a bye. Phil, we've gone too many games without discussing the SEC. I think 5. So now let's jump back into SEC country. It just means more. I won't let it happen again. Trust me. Florida and Georgia, a border war. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party. We can still call it that because who's going to stop us? I think politically correctness has kind of seeped into society with that. But, hey, look, it's Phil Steele show. He approves it. I approve the message. We know Tripp certainly does. The Bulldogs are favored by 22.5 in Jacksonville. Is this the richest line ever in this series? It's got to be. And if you look back to last year, Phil, by the way, 3:30 start CBS, as is customary for the Gators and the Bulldogs. Georgia blew the doors off the Gators late in that first half. It was a deadlock game, 0-0, until I think it was the final 12, 15 plays or so. There were 3 tutties.
Yeah, and that really changed the entire outlook of the game, and the fact that Dan Mullen's no longer at Florida and Georgia went on to win a national championship. And by the way, we don't have time to look at it right now, but if you click right here where it says last 40-plus years results, you actually get spread records all the way back to 1976. So to answer your question, anybody out there right now could go look at every single line on the Georgia-Florida game and see who the biggest favorite, biggest underdog was. But odds are this is probably the biggest Georgia's been favored. Now, this is a series that has had a lot of blowouts. If you look here, I don't think that this game's been decided by less than 20 points for a while. I had very few, very close games. The average margin of victory is 20 points. But for this one, I'm going to leave it up to Kyle and Tripp. You guys are going to tell me who's going to cover this game. My question is, are we going to get the good Anthony Richardson or are we going to get the bad Anthony Richardson? Because if it's a good Anthony Richardson, the one that was here against Utah or the one that lit up Tennessee for 450 yards passing, I like Florida to cover. If we get the other Anthony Richardson that's throwing interceptions against Kentucky and letting Kentucky come back and win that game, Georgia will step on their throat at the end of the game. So, Kyle, good or bad Anthony Richardson?
If I had a coin, I would flip it. Hang on, I think I got one here. It's more like, actually, I don't think a coin does it proper justice. That's probably giving Anthony Richardson better odds than what he deserves. But we'll go heads and tails. Tails will be the bad. Heads will be the good. It'll be a good Anthony Richardson. I've got the front side heads of a solid American nickel. Who's on the nickel? I'm not a currency guy. Who is that? Anyways,
Jefferson,
good.
isn't it?
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson. So Anthony Richardson will be exceptional by his standards. That's not going to be like Utah exceptional, but he'll be okay. He's not going to be he's not going to be the reason why Florida gets blown out on Saturday. He's going to at least hold his own. If you look at his numbers, what do we got? 96 of 170. He's completing 56.5% of his passes, over 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, rating a 127.4 on the year. So I think he'll play well on Saturday.
Tripp, good or bad?
I don't know. I'd probably lean towards Georgia in this game, but I try to keep up with all the NFL mock drafts. He's still popping up in the top 15, top 20 picks, Anthony Richardson.
There you go. Yeah, I'm torn on the game, so I'm just going to enjoy watching it. And for the record, in the magazine, in my newsletter, I do call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
I know you do, Phil. I know you do. You know what you should? You should enjoy some candy with that game, too, as well, with Halloween. Are you giving out fun-size candy bars on Monday, Phil? Are those going to be in your possession on Saturday for Week 9?
Always give out the big ones.
The big ones. Good.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
There you go. All right. All right, let's jump back over to the Big Ten. We've got 17th ranked Illinois on the road at Nebraska. Fighting Illini have won 5 in a row. That's their most since 2011. Nebraska's 2-2 under head coach Mickey Joseph, and I don't know. I don't have much of a lean here on this one either. Maybe the under a little bit, but curious to see if you think Tommy DeVito can cover that 7.5 in Lincoln on Saturday.
I find it difficult to go against Illinois at this point in time. Take a look at the average game grades that I just lit up here, and you will see that I think Illinois is what, 16 in the country, something in that area, 16, 17, 18. My average game grades have them the number 5 team in the country right now. They're playing to 117.2 level. You look at their defense, they're holding opponents to 221 yards per game. They out Wisconsin when they played them, ran the ball down their throat and stopped them. Great defense. They have the run game with Chase Brown. Tommy DeVito's doing great at quarterback, but this is rare air for them now. They've got the record. They're the leaders in the Big Ten West, and they're big favorites, over a touchdown favorite on the road against a desperate Nebraska team that has shown some life. I mean, they beat Indiana and Rutgers and covered against Purdue, a game which I liked them on the money line. They came up just short there, but they averaged 9 yards per play against Purdue. So it's been a different Nebraska team. This one's tough to call. I would probably lean a little bit with the underdog in this one, but how do you go against all these green numbers that you have for Illinois? So I think it's going to be a fun one to watch.
I think so too. ILLINI. If Illinois can take care of business here, get to 7-1, I will wear an Illinois shirt next week on the show. Why not? Because I've got every other school in my closet, as we've come to learn. However, the Illinois roots, okay? People around here say I have too many teams, Phil. I don't understand it, okay? It's Notre Dame. It's Duke basketball. Give me a little bit of Western Illinois Fighting Leathernecks because that's my alma mater. But, hey, I got to support the State University and the University of Illinois. I've had great times there, great party times. I watched Juice Williams, okay, in that last year that Illinois was relevant. I was there at Memorial Stadium as a fan. That was the year Illinois went to the Rose Bowl. I mean, It's been a while that Illinois has been relevant in this fashion. So I'm going to jump back aboard that bandwagon, and I'm going to start pumping the Illinois Orange here. 17th.
Hey, was that Rashard Mendenhall?
Yes.
For Illinois? Yes. I
Yes.
remember that, yeah. Play for the Steelers. Yeah.
Illinois is ranked 17th nationally, Phil. Also, you said you had them ranked in your power ratings as 5 or 7?
5.
5.
In the average game grades.
They're covering by an average of 11.9 points per game. 5-2 against the spread this year. That's the best cover average of any team nationally, and they're given a touchdown and a half, 7.5, 50.5 the total, 3:30 on ABC. Illinois and Nebraska. Giddy up for those two. Oklahoma State and Kansas State. 9th-ranked team, the Pokes, had to erase a 2-touchdown deficit in the fourth quarter. 2 touchdown passes from Spencer Sanders, who looked much healthier, or at least much more equipped than he was in the latter stages of the game against TCU when the Horned Frogs came back on him the week prior. And Oklahoma State was able to reverse that second-half deficit, come back and deliver the blow and cover. Phil, you and I both had good weeks. We'll recap those when we give your top 3 plays. But OK State, a 1-point underdog, looks like most recent check. Yeah, K-State 1.5. 56 is the total. So the Wildcats are favored here, 3:30 on Fox.
Yeah, and this is one where, I just showed you my average game grades love Illinois. They actually only have Oklahoma State as my number 39 team in the country, playing to a 103.7 level. I mean, Oklahoma State, despite playing a lackluster schedule, is only plus 12 yards per game. That's hard to believe that they've got this 6-1 record. My average game grade is say they're doing it with mirrors, but Mike Gundy is some sort of magician. Now, one thing they do have, they've got one of the best special teams in the country, and that's been a major factor. But here's 2 numbers to throw at you, and it has nothing to do with Phil Steele Plus. It's more technical handicapping here. Oklahoma State is 13-1 against the spread in Big 12 games. They covered against TCU, remember. They only lost by 3. They were getting 3.5. And they are also 18-6-1 against ranked teams. So Gundy does great in Big 12, does great against ranked teams. And as I touched on earlier, Kansas State was down to their 3rd-string quarterback in the second half, And Jake Rubley didn't get him anywhere. 0 for 1 passing, an interception return for a touchdown. If Martinez is not 100%, if Howard's not 100%, you have to go with Jake Rubley. I think Spencer Sanders getting healthier, having a better season than expected. 15 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. I'm going to take Oklahoma State plus the 1 in this one.
I love that pick. I think we're going to see more of Rubley because Will Howard, from what I read, he's actually somebody that they're planning to redshirt if possible, as long as he can stay under that plateau, that minimum number of games, 4 or 5 games, whatever it might be. But Howard came in and he was lights out. He set the world on fire, led K-State to 4 straight touchdown drives against TCU, but ultimately it fizzled in the end because, again, his health was in question. So I like that pick, Phil. Might be a foreshadowing of what's to come here at the end of the show here in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. Kansas State and Oklahoma State's at 3:30, as is 10th-ranked Wake Forest and Louisville. 3:30 game on ACC Network. Phil, I'm tired of playing games. I'm going to take an outright underdog every single week. I want to highlight, I want to spotlight, I want to hitch my wagon, go all in, bet the house on an outright underdog. However, Louisville's got to play mistake-free football. I think they can. The WikiLeaks scandal, this brewing a rivalry that seems to intensify every single year. Louisville's covered 7 of 8 against Wake Forest overall. Can Louisville be perfect against Wake Forest as a dog, 3.5-point underdog on Saturday?
Yeah, I do think that they win this game outright. You take a look at the two teams. Louisville's played the much tougher schedule than has Wake Forest. This is a Louisville team that went into UCF, a very good team. Beat them on the road by 6, and they've been playing great football the last 2 games. Malik Cunningham did miss 3 or 4 series last week, but here's the thing. When they played Boston College and Malik Cunningham went out of the game, Brock Doman looked ill-prepared, and that's why they lost to Boston College. He was in there in the 4th quarter and didn't look good, but Brock Doman looked great against Virginia, and he looked good against Pitt when he comes in. So if Cunningham comes out for a few series, we're okay because we got Brock Doman, and we have a large defensive edge here with Louisville. Louisville this year has recorded 24 sacks, which is 12.1%. So we get pressure on the quarterback. We can blow up that slow mesh that Wake Forest has. And as much as I love Wake and Sam Hartman and what they're doing, I think this Louisville team's an under-the-radar team. And you hit it right on the head. You look at these two teams matchup-wise, and Louisville's won 2 of the last 3, and they're usually high-scoring. I like Malik Cunningham and Louisville at home to pull the upset in this one.
I'm proud of you, Kyle. You've been talking about that game all week.
I have. I really have.
He had it on the list Monday, and he's like Louisville all week long, so that's good. I'm glad Phil agrees with you. We'll bounce it back to the SEC now. We've got Missouri on the road at South Carolina for a 3:30 kick at Williams-Brice. South Carolina laying 3.5. The total's at 46.5. South Carolina's ranked again for the first time since 2018. They're checking in at number 25 in the polls. They're coming off nice wins over Kentucky and Texas A&M. I don't know. I think this is going to be a close game, but I do like the under again. I hate to take this many unders, but I kind of like the under here in Missouri, 6-0 on the under in their last 6.
Yeah, good call, Trip. Good call on the under. And here's something I want to point out. The beautiful thing about philsteele.com. Let's go back to last year. When you look at last year, you see all this red here for Missouri, and hopefully you guys can see this pretty clear. They were a horrible defense. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass. They were giving up like 7.5 yards per carry. They fired their defense coordinator, switched defenses. Look at this. Over the last 4 weeks last year, they allowed 335 yards per game. They were allowing their opponents like 110 yards above their season average. But over the last 4 weeks, they held opponents to 75 yards per game below their season average. Now, you might have thought, okay, that was just a thing. But look at this year. Missouri's defense this year is allowing 324 yards per game. They're holding their opponents to 98 yards per game below their season average, number 12 in the country. So that switch last year has carried over. They're playing excellent defense. And as Tripp pointed out, they've got 6 straight unders rolling in. Now, if you watched the South Carolina Texas A&M game last week and didn't just look at the scores, you know that South Carolina was super lucky to be up 17-0 in that game. They got a kick return touchdown, an interception return, a fumble return. They had 19 yards offense and 1 first down. and yet they led 17-0. You watch the rest of the game, Texas A&M was clearly the better team. They had a 398, 286-yard edge, 23-13 first down edge. A&M had the ball down 3, about to take the lead. Guess what? A&M loses their starting quarterback. They have to go to the freshman quarterback off the bench. Their starter, Haynes King, who was having a really good game, out for the rest of the game. Offense disappears. South Carolina does it with Mears, comes out with the win 30-24. They play Kentucky. They play Kentucky when Kentucky had a backup quarterback. They got the win there. They beat Charlotte, a very poor team. South Carolina State, a good FCS team that doesn't play well against FBS teams. And they blocked 2 punts against Georgia State. So I do think it'll be a low-scoring game. South Carolina may be fortunate to come out with the win, but I would lean a little bit with the underdog Missouri in this one, just for the fact that South Carolina's off such a misleading final last week.
Phil, what's afternoon delight without discussion of Kinnick Stadium and Iowa football? And what's more, Northwestern is the visitor. Now, this over-under line has ballooned to 37.5.
Wow.
37.5. Hawkeyes are favored by 11, 3:30 on ESPN2. 37.5, and Iowa has combined to just score 30 points, period, over their last 3 games, averaging 128th worst in points out of 131 teams at 14 per game. Northwestern, 97th in total defense. They're allowing 28 points per game. Something's got to give here. Iowa, 7 touchdowns only through 7 games. What's it looking like at Kinnick Stadium between Northwestern and Iowa Saturday?
Yeah, I would probably lean with the under. And you go back, I've heard a lot of analysts this week talk about Ohio State. Ohio State scored 54 points on Iowa last week. Not really. It was more or less Iowa's offense that had them scoring the points. If you click here on the box score, you can take a look at last week's game for Ohio State. And you look at some of these touchdown drives for the Buckeyes. Let's see, this touchdown drive here. Okay, they got a 75-yard drive. But then the other touchdown drives in the game, here they had a 15-yard drive. They had an interception return for a touchdown. They had a 24-yard scoring drive, a 17-yard scoring drive, a 1-yard scoring drive. Iowa turned the ball over 6 times. So Ohio State was basically given the ball in the Iowa 20 numerous times. Yeah, they scored 54 points, but only 360 yards. And that, by the way, Iowa held them to 184 yards below their season average. So nothing wrong with that Iowa defense. They are outstanding, one of the best defenses out there. And Northwestern has struggled to move the ball. So I do think Iowa's defense shuts down Northwestern. Meanwhile, Iowa took on a pretty poor Nevada team. If you watch the game, you know, there was weather delays at the end of the game. Iowa just wanted to get out of there, but they did only score 27 points. So I would probably lean with the under here. And Northwestern, as bad as they looked against Wisconsin, look at their defense. They gave up 17 here, 17 to Penn State, 31 to Maryland, and that was on a late 80-yard run by Hemby for a touchdown. So I'd probably lean with the under and lean a little bit with Northwestern. They've really only played one bad game this year, one really bad game, Wisconsin. Other than that, they actually had the yardage edge against Duke, Southern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, and they upset Nebraska. So for me, it's a tough one to wager on because I think the number is good in both spots, but that's the way I would lean in that one.
If you're watching at CS Now Tweets Live, as that's where we are every single Thursday at 1 o'clock, follow Phil Steele at PhilSteele042. But at CS Now Tweets, interact with us for your chance to win a free subscription to Phil Steele Plus, which is what you're getting a first-hand view at when Phil shares his screen as we're live every single Thursday at 1 o'clock. All the advanced data and analytics, the stats, be more like Phil. It's what he uses, Phil Steele Plus. Get more information at philsteele.com. Let's move to the primetime fun. And first, out of the gates, 19th-ranked Kentucky and 3rd-ranked Tennessee. The Volunteers favored by 12.5. 63.5 is the total. 7 o'clock on ESPN. The Vols and the Wildcats. Tennessee 7-0 for the first time since their 98 national championship. They've won 8 of 10 in the series.
Yeah, and this one's interesting in the fact that you're definitely going to see the best Kentucky team all year. Remember, Christopher Rodriguez missed the first 4 games. He's now back fully healthy. And if you take a look at the screen here, you could see that Rodriguez is actually playing better. He had in his first game back, he only had 72 yards. You get the individual stats on every single player, every single game last 5 years. If you're a fantasy football player, you'll love this. But 126 yards rushing here, 187 yards rushing in his last game, and he's fresh. He's fully healthy. Will Levis, of course, missed the South Carolina game, as we mentioned. He's back healthy, and they have a really good defense, holding opponents to 102 yards per game below their season average. But when I look at Tennessee, I'm almost thinking I'm looking at LSU of 2019, an unstoppable offense that just keeps scoring. And these guys put up 52 points, 567 yards on Alabama. I think they can score on anybody. I don't think Kentucky has the offense to keep up with Tennessee if it turns into a score fest. I like Tennessee. If the game's lower scoring, let's say it's close at the half, then I think Kentucky actually has a shot at the upset. But of the two outcomes, a slight lean to Tennessee. But this is one of those games I'm just going to enjoy watching.
All right, Phil, I've got one for you here. You like playing streaks, right? I've got a streak for you. Colorado State, 7-0 on the unders again. I keep saying that word and I hate it, but they're under on every single game this season. They're at Boise State, 27.5-point dog, but that over-under sitting at 42.5. Can we go under again? Can we keep playing the streak, or are they due to go over for one?
Yeah, well, I mean, on the year, Colorado State's averaging 267 yards per game and 13 points per game. And let's see who they've got in their stable here at running back. Morrow has been running the ball better. In fact, the last 3 games, and let me share this with the viewers just to show you what I'm looking at. And once again, you become an instant expert on every team with Phil Steele Plus. Look at this. Morrow didn't even run the ball at the start of the year. He had this few yards, and now 168, 116, 147 over the last 3 weeks. Millen returned to the lineup, as you could see. Millen was out 3 games. He's back, hit 17 to 24 passing. So their offense is better, but look at Boise's defense. These last 4 weeks are giving up 235 yards per game, holding opponents to 151 below their season average. You know, if they hold Colorado State to 151 below their season average, that's 116 yards for Colorado State. So I do like the under in that respect. Taylon Green is running quarterback, different than Bachmeier. It's giving them a run game. The run game's going to shrink the clock. And Colorado State's got an adequate run defense, so I don't think they're going to get run over. So I would lean. I love streaks, as you mentioned, Trip. So let's go ahead and ride that streak. Let's take the under.
All right, let's do it. All right, I got 2 more games I want to get to here. Michigan State on the road at Michigan. They're laying a big number. It's 22.5. That's a lot in a rivalry game like that. And Michigan also, last week they had no problem covering that small number against Penn State. They won that one going away. But the smaller lines this year, they've kind of struggled to cover. They had trouble putting away Maryland. I think they had trouble putting away Indiana too. So what do you like here in this one?
Yeah, this one's going to be a big dish of revenge, I feel, when you look at Michigan State. If you remember last year's game when these two played, Michigan had that thing locked up and sealed. They were dominating the football game. They were ahead 30-14 late in the third quarter. They've got the game locked up and sealed. And then Michigan State got it was one, I think they summed it up correctly on the Big Ten Network that night afterwards. Michigan State needed about 8 big plays to happen, and they got all 8 big plays, and they somehow came back and won. That makes me think that this year, if Michigan's up by 16 or Michigan's up by 20, that they just continue to go and step on Michigan State's throat. And this is a Michigan State team that, you remember, against Washington, they trailed 39-14. Against Minnesota, they trailed 34-0. Against Ohio State, they were down 49-14. They got late touchdowns in those games. I don't think Michigan gives them a late touchdown. As we know, Michigan State's defense is really struggling. They're struggling to stop the run, but really struggle against the pass. If you're a fantasy football player, put J.J. McCarthy on your team this week because Michigan State's going to stack the line. They're going to say, we're tough. They're going to try to take away the run. J.J. McCarthy's going to have a huge game. 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. Put him on your fantasy team. We'll see how that plays out next week. But I like Michigan to get the revenge for last year, not let up at the end. I like Michigan minus the points.
Ooh, fired up Phil is the best kind of Phil, right, Trip? Inject that into your veins.
No kidding, man.
That'll be the college football Saturday night broadcast, Sloan Martin and Mike Golick Jr. So tune into that on the Varsity Network app. If you haven't downloaded it already, you're doing it wrong. All the play-by-play, all the coaches shows for all of the schools across the country, all of our partners with Learfield. Download the Varsity Network app. That trophy, by the way, technically, the Paul Bunyan Trophy, it's technically the Paul Bunyan Governor of Michigan Trophy. First introduced in 1953. So slightly longer name than what we all use, but one of my favorite. 4 feet tall, made of wood, the axe and the feet. on Paul Bunyan, planted on the state of Michigan. Real cool. Michigan State and Michigan playing for that at 7:30 on ABC. Trip, one team in particular Saturday night, before we go chasing and get Phil's top 3 plays, is going to allow you to return on the Michael Felder College Sports Now show on Friday.
right.
If you're listening on this feed, Roddy Jones, Wayne Cook, Michael Felder all join Stephen Hartzell throughout the week, 3 days during the week for College Sports Now. Trip produces on Friday with Felder, and it's UTEP that is allowing you to show your face or rear your ugliness again on Friday.
UTEP was my dog last week. We do the That's My Dog segment where you've got to pick an underdog that's going to win outright. And every time that I go 0 for 1 or 0 for 2, Hartzell threatens to never let me back on the show. I respond with winners, and the circle just keeps on spinning. UTEP hit for me last week. That was a crazy game, a crazy ending to that game. But they came through against FAU. This week, they're at home against Middle Tennessee State. What do you like here, Phil? Can they do it again?
Yeah, and you talk about a game. That play and the extra point was remarkable to me. Now, I don't know if the viewers know, but I've got 12 TVs in front of me, so I'm watching 12 games all day long. I have never seen a play like that in the UTEP game. The UTEP defensive lineman goes up to block the extra point. It knocks his helmet off. He runs about 10 yards downfield, and he just gives himself up. Didn't touch a player, didn't touch the ball, didn't affect the play, and it was all after the blocked extra point. They ended up, UTEP returned it for 2, and all of a sudden had the lead, or in the game they were still up in the game. And what they did is they not only took away the 2-point conversion, they allowed FAU to kick the extra point, which I'm scratching my head. I'm like, well, it was after the blocked extra point. It should have just nullified the return. Anyway, UTEP still got the win, which was good. But in this game, I do like UTEP. I think if you take a look at my statistics on this one, I mean, UTEP's got the better run game coming in. They've got the much better defense. Middle Tennessee's given up 36 yards per game above their season average, 426 yards per game. UTEP's defense holding opponents to 25 yards below their season average. I like Awatt and Hankins running the football. Gavin Hardison is a quarterback that's got a powerful arm. In fact, when I've talked to Coach Dimel, he said it's the best arm he's ever seen on a quarterback. And UTEP's playing better at home. I think they get to a bowl game this year, and this is a huge game for them. Frankly, a little surprised the number's only 1.5. I like UTEP.
Phil's top plays, Trips, Teaser, and Asicko will pick up the pace. A sprint to the finish here, but first we got to get right. A couple of late-night chasing picks. San Diego State, 8 points underdog. 40 is the total at Fresno State, 10:30 on FS1. Then Wyoming given 10.5, 50.5 the total at Hawaii. This one's going to kick at midnight, Phil. What do you like about either of those two games?
Yeah, I'm going to pick one of the two games, and I'm going to go with Hawaii against Wyoming. If you look at last week, Wyoming, they had a very impressive win against Utah State. Guess what? Utah State was down to their 4th string QB, and Wyoming was able to get the win. If you follow Wyoming, you know they're a team that's really good at home, not so good on the road. Hawaii's actually playing better. They started out the season horrifically. The last 4 weeks are playing much better. They're only being outgained by 28 yards per game. They beat Nevada at home in their last game. They led Colorado State last week on the road 13-3. Braden Shaker's playing better. I like Hawaii plus the double digits at home in a potential upset. And watch Dedrick Parson. He's playing real good at the running back spot for Hawaii with over 500 yards this year.
All right, kids, pay attention. Phil's top 3 plays of the week. You hit on San Diego State, -8 against Nevada. Alabama covered the 21 against Mississippi State. Missed on Miami against Western Michigan. 6.5 is the total there. 2-1 on your power plays. What's on tap for week 9?
Well, it's 2 of the games we've talked about already. And last week, as you recall, I got all fired up on Alabama and then used Alabama. This week, I got all fired up on Michigan. We're going to use Michigan. The other one, which we talked about earlier, I had Louisville plus the 3.5 over Wake Forest in a potential upset. But here's a game we haven't talked about, and it's Navy against Temple. And the one thing I want to quickly point out in this game, if I can get to it, there we go, is Temple home and away is 2 different teams. Let's take a look at their home and away averages right here. At home, Temple allows 289 yards per game. That's really good. On the road, they're giving up 523 yards per game. They're giving up 5 yards a carry, 70% completions, and they have a first-year head coach, Stan Drayton. By the way, Stan Drayton went to the same high school I did, John Marshall, here in in the Cleveland area. So he's really rooting for Stan all year, but it's his first crack at the Navy option. Navy usually does pretty good against teams that are taking it on for the first time. So I like Navy's option to roll it up against a Temple team, a Temple defense that has struggled on the road. Temple's only averaging 256 on the road as well. I like Navy minus 13.5 for that one.
All right, there you have Phil's top 3 plays. I went 3-0. I took 3 underdogs last week in Vanderbilt, Oklahoma State, and Duke. Tempted to go 3 underdogs again this week. However, I'm going to stay away from Penn State and Ohio State. I'm going to take that underplay that Phil recommended for Virginia Tech and NC State on Thursday night. So give me the under in that matchup. Trip, you can check me on what that under was. But Louisville certainly is going to cover the 4.5 against Wake Forest. That's my other pick. And then the final underdog selection, my third, Oklahoma State plus 1.5 at K-State. Pokes came through for me as an underdog against Texas a week ago. I'm going to go with them. What was the over-under for tonight, Trip?
39.5, I believe.
Give it to me. Give me the college football under. Man, what a scary proposition, but I'm going to take it. All right, Trip, floor is yours. After hitting last week, what do you have in store for us today?
Yeah, way too many unders this week. But on the teaser here, and going back to last week, I had a couple of nice picks, but I picked an insane amount of losers. I've never seen that many losses come through my betting grid that quick. So I think I will jump tonight and try to do a little parlay with the under on NC State and then grab Southern Miss, because I think we're all in agreement on that, which is kind of scary in itself. But for the teaser, I'm taking Akron at home against Miami, Ohio. They're getting 8. I'm going to tease it up to 15. I'm also going to take Central Florida. They're at home against Cincinnati. They're a 2-point favorite, so I'll get UCF plus 5. I'll tease down the under for Northwestern Iowa, or tease it up rather, to 44.5. I'm going to do the same thing with Boise State and Colorado State. That under goes from 43 to 50.
What does a 4-team teaser pay?
I think $10 wins 22.50.
Okay.
And $1 million wins $2.25 million. I mean, it's no big deal.
And that's what you're
It's up to
wagering
you.
on this week, right, Trip?
Yeah, in that neighborhood.
All right, so Phil took the Rainbow Warriors as part of his top 3. Hawaii hit in the Sickos pick. Sickos are now 7-2. Week ago, 5.5. They covered as underdogs at Colorado State. The Rams did win 17-13. New Mexico State, 2.5-point favorite, 37 the total at UMass, 3:30 ESPN3. This is the Sicko game, the feature, the spotlight. It's where all the marbles should be focused. The Aggies, 2-5, did not play last week against San Jose State. Minutemen, 1-6. Jerry Kill against Don Brown. Halloween is Monday. I've got to go for the kill shot, right? It only makes sense. Give me the Aggies again. New Mexico State. Jerry Kill is going to get the Sickos to 8-2. Phil, you can be found on Twitter at PhilSteele042. Tell us what we can be looking for on Fridays. We'll get another peek of Phil Steele Plus in some of your selections for the weekend.
Yeah, every Friday morning I put out the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections. Another winning week again last week, going 4-2 on the plays. A tough loss with the Kansas State, or it would have been 5-1. But you get not only free plays, but complete analysis behind it, just like we have here. Break down each game, put the two teams up side by side, and let you see how Phil Steele Plus works. Plus, you get about 11 or 12 free plays every week.
And everybody go to Phil's house outside of Cleveland for the full-size candy bars on Monday night. Find him on Twitter, slide in his DMs at PhilSteele042. Get a magazine. If you haven't already, I can't help you. They're still out there. Or go online, PhilSteele.com. He's Trip Hurd at Trip Hurd, at PhilSteele042. I'm at Kyle Schass. I'm going to be a lifeguard. Trip suggested we each should have dressed up as Phil Steele before today's show. We dropped the ball. Maybe we'll hang on to that one for the first week of December. So we've got a few more of these. Week 9 coming up. Enjoy the weekend. Again, tune into us live in living color Thursdays, 1 o'clock at CS Now. Tweets, College Baseball Podcast on the feed. And Trip will have a fine job, fine try, looking to traffic cop Wayne Cook and Michael Felder on the Friday edition of College Sports Now. So enjoy that.
Thanks for watching.
Can't wait.
Phil. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Enjoy.